Hello. Uh, it's Friday. I think it's 11th of July. This is part 7 of my ongoing series about Odda, Norway, and the history of the town in terms of like the industrial nature of the industry here. So moving forward, we kind of reached a bottleneck there yesterday at the end of the day, end of the conversation. So moving forward, I'm gonna read this next little excerpt here. I have some stuff I can talk about here. I just turned the page too, I'm not skipping around. Okay. It says the industrial town of Alvik was a well-developed industrial workplace. This is near where I am now. Because the company was preoccupied with the town's welfare. The municipal authority was not shown equal concern. Okay, Bjolfossen, that's the company, was preoccupied with the town's welfare. Okay, the municipal authority was not shown equal concern for the town's beautification. The municipal authority was not shown equal concern. Thus, cultural enthusiasts are concerned that permission has been granted to unplanned changes in this thoroughly planned town. Changes that weaken the aesthetic entirely. In Alvik, there's been talk of demolishing the old power station. Remember, the cultural enthusiasts, as this book calls them, are the people that are concerned about keeping the natural, what they feel is the natural setting of the town, the historical setting of the town, without demolishing it. In Alvik, there's been talk of demolishing the power station and the trolleyway, which took the workers 1,000 meters straight up in 36 minutes. The industrial town of Rjukan in Telemark County has gone through the process that Odda and Alvik are now struggling with. Rjukan faced up to a discussion on what they wanted to do with their town. They decided to build their future on their history, which is what the Smelteverks here is what they're doing. They're building the future on the history of this town without tearing it down. The future history there was defined as its cultural heritage. The factory history there was defined as its cultural heritage. There was no dispute about an application to UNESCO. Okay, so I really hope some of the people from Odda are watching these videos, because my whole understanding of what's happened here in Odda, I have like first-hand experience with. At one of the most prestigious Norwegian kind of restorations or cultural heritage preservations in Norway. So my grandpa was from Trøndelag, born in Trondheim, and if you're living in Trondheim, Trøndelag County, South Trøndelag, Sør-Trøndelag, doesn't matter. Trøndelag, Røros, the mining town up in the mountains by Sweden that's like 500 years old. That's a really, Røros is a special place if you're in Trondheim. It's a place where families would have gone up into the mountains for the summertime to spend July there, and it's just a very beautiful place to go. That's in the county of Trøndelag. Okay. Keep in mind that my grandpa was born in Trondheim, and he lived in Røros when I was alive. But I don't have like first-hand experience of that. That's a memory of mine, what he had. It's not me living that. So people have asked me about, here I am in Hordaland County, and they felt like, what's a Tronder doing all the way down in Hordaland? For me, I just know the history of my grandfather. I don't know the political the micro political atmosphere of Norway. I don't know the differences. So for me, it's just the memory that I have to struggle with a little bit in missing Trondheim and Røros, but it's only missing it for the times that I visited it for my Christmas or my fall trips to Norway. So I would come to Norway in September since 2010. One of my stops, I always flew into Trondheim, and then one of my stops, usually at the end of my trip, was Røros, and I would stay there for a week. So I can always do that. So, but in terms of Alvik and Odda and Tisidal, Røros applied for the UNESCO World Heritage Site in 1978, I believe, and it was right after the last copper mine shut down. Okay, so my grandpa, right at that time, he started building a house in the city center, just a couple blocks from that main strip. If you've ever been in Røros, there's pretty much one main road that everyone hangs out on, and he built a house about 2 streets over. And he lived there until I died, but he moved to Røros right when this was all happening. So, I had never talked to my grandpa about this, but obviously he had a feeling, he was an investor, he had a feeling that things were changing in Røros. So it was a mining town, and then the mine shut down, and then Røros is a lot different, in ways it isn't a lot different, but in ways it is a lot different. Røros is way up in the mountains above Trondheim. It's about a 2-hour drive, 3-hour drive from Trondheim, up in the mountains. There's no main highway that goes through Røros. It's close to Sweden, so there's the border to Sweden that you can get over to Sweden really quick. But it's in the middle of nowhere. So Røros was this town that there was a great concern that it could really fall to pieces after the mines shut down, is what I've been told. Now, why would my grandpa have built a house somewhere that was surely a place that was possibly going to fall to pieces? Right. So maybe he knew that it wasn't going to fall to pieces, and he built his house there. He also invested in the hotel, the Røros Hotel, which is probably the most well-known hotel in Røros. He invested in that. So, in 1978, 77, 78. So, the town survived the whole transition. And now the smelting plant right in the middle of town for the copper is now a museum. You can go and see the mines scattered all over the place. It makes for good hikes. So what they're talking about here is how these of Alvik and Odda, Tisidal, how they decided to build their future on their history. This is what I've been talking about all week in reading this from this book. The factory city there was defined as its cultural heritage. So in Røros, it's obvious that the factory is part of the history of the town. If it wasn't for that smelting plant in Røros and the little wooden houses all kind of surrounding it where the workers would live, and it really would lose a lot. The river that flows through the town, it obviously the town was established there because of the mining. There's no question about it. Here, a little less so. Obviously, the factories were established here because of the water and electricity. Traditionally, though, this was a probably farming, a native living place for native people. Thousands of years ago, probably this was probably a safe place to live and start a village. Prehistoric man survived here, I'm sure. So it's a little different. Prehistoric man did not really survive up in Røros. It's too cold, it's way up high, there's not probably enough food there. So reindeer herders would probably pass through. So there's a little bit so when you're talking about the cultural heritage of Odda and Alvik, it's a little different. This book is basically saying that the cultural heritage is a more modern